can sometimes feel like a lot, but you don't have to do it alone. I strongly believe that we're stronger together. Here, we're going to slow down, have real talks, make sense of things together, and explore ways to intentionally grow the life you want. We're going to talk about mental and physical health, relationships, money, work, and community. Welcome to Rooted in Intention with me, Karina Gomez. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. In this one, we're going to be diving into all about the subconscious mind. And okay, I'm excited about every episode, but I'm particularly excited about this one because the subconscious mind is one of those things that I first learned about a few years back. And I was like, oh my God, everyone has to know about this. I was just so mind blown. And I was like, we have all of these limiting beliefs, and we think that they're true and they're limiting our reality. And they distort how we take things in and the stories that we believe around them. So I am so excited to share more with you all because it was one of those things when I first really learned about limiting beliefs through a podcast just like this. I wanted to share information with folks, and I was like, maybe I could do this through community workshops and get people together and we can talk about it, especially some of those limiting beliefs that are really prominent within society or really prominent within the Latino culture, within the immigrant culture. And I had my own limiting beliefs, and it was that I wasn't ready to talk about it and that I should just pause. And I was dedicated to my full-time job at the time. So that's kind of where all of my attention went. This was also around the time where I mentioned some family issues came up. So my mind was kind of scattered. So this wasn't one of the things that was my top priority, but it was definitely something that I thought was so cool. And I remember talking to my older brother about it. And I was like, dude, we should do some community workshops, but we didn't. And well, here I am now with the podcast. So I am so excited to share more with you all because the subconscious mind is one of those things that's really in the background. I would say controlling our actions. And if you have found yourself wanting to do something and you make this plan, right? For an example, I'm going to go to the gym 3 to 5 times a day. And then the days come and maybe you get out of work and you're tired and you're like, you know what? I'm not going to go. And then you don't end up going, even though your logical, conscious mind makes these wonderful plans. There's a part of your mind that is actually influencing your behavior a lot more than those conscious thoughts that you have, that conscious intention that you have. And the subconscious mind, the way that I can break it down in its more simplistic form is the part of the mind that was wired for survival. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of information out in the world, right? And we can't be paying attention to everything because that's going to take up a lot of processing power. So our mind adapted to identify patterns in order to make survival easier and to conserve energy. And a lot of these patterns were actually shaped when we were young, particularly between the ages of 0 to 8 during that child development. We took on things from our environment. We learned things from our parents, from our caregivers. As I mentioned in the episode around attachment styles, we're really malleable and we're like these little sponges that just soak up everything. And the subconscious mind, particularly, is programmed through repetition and through emotion. So anything that we heard a lot, think of those messages that you heard around either money or relationships. education, around beauty, all of those messages that were repeated specifically were deeply programming our subconscious mind. And then anything that had any strong emotions, which is why things like traumatic events are so impactful, is because there's oftentimes a strong emotion attached to that. And so now really think about our subconscious mind was specifically programmed during the ages between 0 to 8, as well as throughout other experiences throughout our adult life and other relationships and that type of thing, but particularly through childhood. And we created these patterns, we created these blueprints in order to decrease the energy that we spend kind of making sense of the world around us. And if those patterns are serving us, that's great. It's making life simpler, right? But if those patterns of thought, those patterns of beliefs are no longer serving us, are actually holding us back, that's not actually that helpful. And if you've ever felt like you're just kind of going through life, rinse and repeat, and you kind of feel like you're on autopilot and you're not very fulfilled, it's probably because you have these programs within your subconscious mind that are running the show. And that was the intention, right? Is for us to conserve energy. However, when that isn't working for us anymore, that's when it's time to really start diving into our inner work and knowing what our subconscious programming is in order so we can reprogram it. Because as I mentioned in the episode about attachment styles, our brain is malleable, and neuroscience research has shown that our brains have the ability to change every day all throughout our life, and it is malleable and it is flexible, and we could create new neural pathways so we can actually work with what we know about neuroscience and what we know about psychology, and we can reprogram our mind in order to create new subconscious programming that is actually going to get us into the direction that we want to be going. So if you find yourself wanting to consciously be doing something, but you actually find it really hard to actually do the thing when you want to do it, it is most likely some subconscious core belief that is holding you back. And the way that this specifically plays out is at the root of the subconscious mind is we have these core beliefs. And these core beliefs are what then branch out and create these thought patterns that we have that tie back to the core beliefs. And if you start being very mindful and you just get curious about the thoughts that you have on your day to day, you're going to really notice that a lot of the thoughts that you have are very repetitive and very similar. And of course, you have new thoughts, and we're creative creatures and that type of thing. But there are probably some that come up again and again. And think about this because during this month, I released another episode on money with an interview with Lucy King, which, if you haven't checked out, go check it out. But during that episode, one of the questions that I asked Lucy was a bit more about her money beliefs and her money stories. And she mentioned a few things, particularly around previously believing that education was going to bring wealth. And that's kind of one of the stories. And one of the other things that she said was the belief that in order to get more money, that you had to work harder. And I know within the Latino community, the immigrant community, that's one of the beliefs that we oftentimes have is that you have to work hard in order to earn money. And what that oftentimes ends up leading into is us going to go get more education, more degrees, more certifications. And yet, there are oftentimes in other communities, in other households, where yes, education was maybe important, but there was also discussions around entrepreneurship and what that looked like. And so these different belief systems end up influencing the things that you end up paying attention to, and what are the things that you think you're supposed to be doing in order to create the life that you want. So when we have these core beliefs, those core beliefs could be things that work out for you and are in your favor, like I am worthy, I am lovable, I am safe, but they can also be some core wounds in there. And I would differentiate the difference between a helpful core belief and a core wound, as that core wound is actually bringing up a lot of inner turmoil and it's a belief that is no longer serving you. So it could be things like at the very core of it, things like I am not worthy, I am unsafe, I am not lovable, I am stupid, I am bad. And if you then branch out to the types of thought patterns that come from those core beliefs or those core wounds, particularly the core beliefs that aren't serving us, then you get those pattern of thoughts where it creates things like if you are at a job interview, for instance, if you have that core belief that you are stupid, you're gonna most likely be thinking thoughts like, I'm not prepared for this. I'm not qualified enough. They're going to know that I'm a fraud. There's people that are smarter than me. I don't really deserve this. And then if you follow that, those thoughts are then creating emotions within you. So if you're thinking a lot of those thoughts during a job interview, for instance, how are you going to show up? You are most likely going to be anxious and you're going to be feeling insecure during that job interview process, right? So now you have this connection of your beliefs, which are creating your pattern of thoughts, which are creating your emotions. And neuroscience shows that a lot of our actions are actually tied back to our emotions. So, again, once you're feeling anxious and insecure, how are you going to show up during that interview? You're most likely not going to be able to be your most authentic self. You're not going to be able to actually show the brilliance that you have if you weren't all caught up criticizing yourself, judging yourself, feeling like you are stupid and there's smarter people out there. So that is what you oftentimes call that self-fulfilling prophecy, is you have that belief of, in this example, I am stupid, which is then causing that chain reaction of pattern of thoughts, creating those feelings, which is then causing you to not show up as your brilliant self. And then what ends up maybe coming out is because you're so caught up in your head, you're actually not able to expend your energy creating a cohesive answer to the question that you were asked in the interview. So then that ends up being a not great interview. Maybe the interviewer ends up feeling like your answer was incomplete and you aren't offered the job. And so when that happens, you might then prove to yourself unintentionally that you are stupid and that's why you weren't hired. And all of this is this like feedback loop on itself. And that's why it's so important to be mindful of how is it that you're showing up in your life and what are some of those subconscious core wounds that might need some rewiring in order for you to live and create the life that you want to create. Because now let's go through the same example again, but with someone that feels competent and like they are smart and they are enough. Their core belief is going to be, I am smart. What I have to say is valuable, and what I have to offer is also valuable. The thoughts that are going to branch off from that belief system are going to be very different. They're going to be most likely more focused on, oh, yes, these are my ideas. And there's going to be a level of confidence behind those ideas. So the way that this person ends up showing up with it in the interview is obviously going to be very different because they're going to be focused on sharing their accomplishments, on sharing their ideas for the projects that they might talk about during the interview. And they're not going to be so caught up in their head thinking the thoughts around the core wounds of I am stupid, I am not enough. They're going to actually be focused on the interview itself and on answering the questions. And so you can imagine that when the interviewer is hearing the questions, they're going to sound a lot more succinct, and it's going to be a lot more likely that the interviewer is going to extend an invite maybe to another interview or a job offering. So you can see how all of these things are interconnected, and that's why I can't emphasize this enough of how it's so important to be looking inward and seeing how we are sometimes holding ourselves back. And I'm not sharing this to minimize that there are things outside of us that are not within our control, but it's really to sometimes recognize that there are a lot more things within our control that we sometimes might not be fully aware of. And we have to be able to give both our internal reality and the external reality equal weight in terms of how they play a role in creating the life that we want to be having. And I think this is particularly true if there are patterns in your life that you see that you are having on repeat, whether that is conflict issues within your relationship, whether it is the amount of money that you're making, whether it is emotional patterns that you're having, whether it is how you show up in dates and your romantic life, whether it is how you are able to show up at work and what that looks like, and relationships that you have with colleagues, whether it is how you react to your kids making a mistake, or how you just show up as a parent more generally. If there are patterns that are coming up over and over again and you don't quite know what to do about it, there most likely is some type of core wound that is really just calling to your attention that needs some healing and needs some rewiring. And I think one of the things is that sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So if you go back to any of the interviews that I have with guests on the podcast, you'll see that I oftentimes ask them about their mindset, about stories and beliefs that they had in successfully creating something that they wanted to create or in handling problems. And it's because I think that there's so much power in seeing what are other people's ways of thinking, of viewing the world, that can be traced back to a core belief that is guiding a lot of their work. Because I know, at least for myself, I think one of the things that came up in therapy was I would sometimes share a particular issue, and the thoughts that I was having and the beliefs that I was having, they were creating these like strong emotions within me. So it felt real. And it took quite a bit of work disentangling that and doing some somatic work, regulating my nervous system, and to then have the ability to break down the core wounds, those belief systems that were no longer serving me, and that I could see then how they were creating certain thoughts and certain feelings and certain actions and a certain type of life that I no longer wanted. Okay, so to give you a particular example within my life, one of the things that I really came to understand at a deeper level was my relationship within work. Because, as I mentioned, I ended up leaving my previous job kind of for a mix of things, but largely because I was really burnt out and I had a lot of things on my plate. And one of the things that I have done now is to really understand how I got to that place. And again, there's a lot of external forces, right? But then there's also that internal reality for how I allowed for that to come to be. So I'm going to kind of work backwards. I was sharing how beliefs create our thoughts, which create our feelings, which create our actions. I'm now going to go backwards because that's a little bit of how I ended up making sense of things. So in my life, I was feeling like I had a large workload. And when I really looked into it, a lot of the things that I was doing was saying yes to projects and having a really hard time setting boundaries and communicating that I had no capacity to take on additional work and have those conversations with the right people in order to manage the workload. And the reason that I was saying yes to projects and I was not communicating fully that I was at capacity and holding my boundaries of not taking on additional projects was largely based off of feelings of anxiety around conflict. And some of the thoughts that were tied to those feelings of anxiety were things like, oh, if I say no, this is going to be bad and I'm going to end up fired because of this. So there's a lot of fear, obviously, with those thoughts as well. And it was like, oh, if I say no, I'm going to be viewed as a bad employee, and then I'm not going to be a team member, and then this is going to negatively impact my career. So, again, those thoughts and those feelings went hand in hand in creating a lot of anxiety and fear. And then if I dived even deeper into that, the belief system, the core beliefs that were really at the root, at least for me, were things like I am not safe. I am not safe to communicate my needs. I am not safe to communicate my boundaries. I will not be safe if I communicate this because then I'm going to end up fired and I'm going to be financially unstable and I'm going to live under a bridge. So, with that example, you could clearly see how that core wound of I am unsafe was creating those thoughts and those feelings, which was leading to those actions or really inactions in my case, that then ended up playing out to me feeling very overworked and overwhelmed by the projects that I had to manage. And what I have found is that you can really apply this model to so many things. And again, I really just want to highlight that, yes, of course, there are external factors that are going to influence things. But what I have found is that it's actually so helpful to work with the things that are within your control because you cannot control other people. So there's so much power in turning inward. When I did start noticing these patterns, I was doing a lot of healing around creating safety, safety to communicate my needs, safety to communicate when I was at capacity, and safety that if that brought something up in the future, whether it was me getting fired or anything like that, that I was going to figure things out because I am resourceful and I have figured things out before in the past. And so that actually gave me this sense of groundedness to have conversations with the people within the organization to really have discussions around this. And then from there, also see, because again, we're engaging with others and the world, right? So once I communicated where things were, how were others responding to me as I was sharing that? And then that provided some data and information in terms of, okay, what are my next steps? Is this a position that I want to continue to be in? Or is it time to remove myself from this position and maybe start thinking about what the next chapter in my life looks like? And again, I just really want to emphasize that our subconscious mind can be healed and reprogrammed. And neuroscience research tells us that our brain can create neural pathways. So if there's one thing that you take out of this episode, let it be this. You are never too old. You are never too stuck. You are never too dumb. You are never too slow to change your life because your brain can always change through neuroplasticity. So you can choose a new direction every day. And you might need some support. You might need some tools or someone or something to help guide you. But ultimately, you have so much potential within you. And if you are not satisfied with your life, I just want you to know that there is hope and there is possibility for you to create a life that you feel fulfilled in. Not always happy in, but that deep inner sense that you are satisfied and fulfilled with your life. And naturally, with that, you're going to have the ups and the downs. Having that array of emotions is the human experience. But again, when you check in with yourself, you know that you are living the life that you are meant to be living. And I have particularly been learning about the subconscious mind because of the integrated attachment theory certification that I'm taking. And I'm really learning about how different attachment styles have these patterns of core wounds and really being able to work with the subconscious mind to reprogram your inner workings into secure attachment. And I just realized that there is actually so much power in knowing about the subconscious mind because core beliefs and core wounds are these just broader things that influence all the different parts of our lives. So this is particularly why I made this a separate episode is to get you thinking about what are those things that you maybe want to be doing or what are those patterns that you catch yourself in again and again that you're just kind of tired of, but you can't quite explain why it's happening. It most likely will be some type of subconscious program that is on default guiding your life. And so I want you to also just pay attention to a lot of the mindset belief and story questions that I asked podcast guests because this is kind of the angle that I'm coming it towards because I recognize that this is so important. I'm just so curious about others' belief systems because that is allowing them to create the things that they want to be creating. I am most likely thinking about the subconscious mind as they're sharing their stories with me, and I just think it's so fascinating. So that is all for today's episode, but I would love to hear what you thought, what this got you thinking of. So go ahead and leave me a review. You can also send me questions either through the Instagram page or through the anonymous texting link in the show notes. I'll also share that I'm in the thinking and the planning stage of how to work with people and help them heal their attachment style, particularly through subconscious reprogramming. And I would love to hear what you think, what you would be most interested in. Would you want to work in a one-on-one type of environment? Would you appreciate community workshops or a group live webinar? Or would you just like to hear more information on additional podcast episodes? Let me know what you think. Again, using the anonymous texting link that's within the show notes. And that's really going to help guide what I share with you all, what topics I go into, what questions you have that I can answer more deeply. And if you do want to stay posted about work that I'm planning on doing to help people reprogram their subconscious mind, if you do send a text, go ahead and include your name and your email, and you will be the first to know about how we can work together if that's something you're interested in. And that's all for today. Okay, bye. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Rooted in Intention. Until next time, and remember to keep showing up for the life, relationships, and community you want. Now go, grow the life you want,